Can I ask you, because I do a lot of relationship coaching and counseling as well, was that a huge strain on your relationship?
It wasn't because it felt like us against the world a little bit. I mean, I'm not
Okay.
saying that there weren't times, but a lot of it was my own issues. It was my own guilt and frustration not being able to provide.
Mhm.
And also I think there was, I mean, there was a lot of insecurities, obviously, but also the doubt around did I make the wrong decision? I mean, heck, I could have been in medicine. I would have these problems if I was a doctor. You know, those were the narratives
Mhm.
that were going through my head. But no, my wife was very, very gracious with me. And we didn't have anything else to lean on.
Mhm.
So I think we just grabbed more tightly to each other. But I will say the reason I think that happened is because very early in our marriage, we started talking about finances. We started having those conversations and again, we had these principles that we were going to practice. We weren't going to take on debt. We weren't going to spend money we didn't have. We were going to be generous, even if we were broke. And maybe we could only give $5 or $10 a week to our church. We were still going to be generous and those types of things. So we were on the same page. And I think a lot of times when you introduce financial stress to a situation, if the groundwork hasn't already been laid, it it just creates even more of a chasm between spouses.
Hi, my name is Luella Young. I'm a psychotherapist and coach. And if you're interested in how your lifestyle is affecting your mental health, then you're at the right place. On this show, I interview various guests from across the miles and share how their lifestyle choices affects their sense of self, their wealth, and most importantly, their health. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to a very interesting episode today as well, we speak about a lot of things, mindset, which is something everyone knows I love. Nutrition, a little bit of nutrition, I think, is going to fall into here, but we're mostly going to center on how to create an abundant life and particularly around our financial mindsets. So today I'm interviewing Chad Hufford, and Chad is well, he has 17 years of experience owning and running a financial planning firm based out of Anchorage, Alaska, that manages roughly $500 million. And he has realized throughout the years that managing his clients' mindsets, behaviors, and habits is really the most crucial part of his job. So he has a background in biochemistry and 2 decades of high performance athletic training and sports psychology. He has blended these seemingly disparate skill sets into elite wealth coaching and helping people create a better relationship with their future by creating the habits, mindsets, and behaviors necessary to succeed in investing and life in general. And Chad, I have to apologize. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
It's Hufford, but it was
Hufford.
close.
Thank you. And I also mispronounced disparate as desperate. So it's disparate skill sets into elite wealth management. So anyway, okay. So Chad, you know what? I'm gonna ask you, okay, a question that I think a lot of people kind of question themselves with, and that is, do you feel it's easy to make money?
I feel for some people it is. I think some people have a natural talent or natural gift to see opportunities to make money. I would say though that managing money is something that comes naturally to very few people. So there are people who naturally are able to make money, but what they do with it once they've made it can be destructive or mismanaged. I think those are the skill sets that people lack the most. And to your point, you didn't ask this question, but we've worked with folks who never made a lot of money, never had a high income, but were still able to build a lot of financial independence and freedom and even wealth. And then I've talked to people who have really high salaries, make a lot of money, but they haven't managed it. They've squandered it. So I think there are some people who may not be able to make a lot of money in life, maybe not ever have a super high paying job, but that doesn't mean they still can't experience financial independence.
Okay, so I 100% agree with you because I mean out there I often hear, these people who have become very, very wealthy and they just so, I don't know, flippantly say, if I can do it, you can do it too. And like, especially as a psychotherapist, I kind of feel like, you know what? Like, that just makes another person who's like really struggling, let's say grind, it's not a work ethic thing. It's more of the type of person you are. Like you said, the ability to see opportunities is one thing you mentioned. Um, but not every, like, we're not all, born of the same cloth sort of thing. We all have different brain chemistries, ways of thinking. One could call it mindset. You have to have the willingness to change your mindset as well if you don't like what's, the way your life is going right now. But I'm a strong believer in, and this ties into management as well of money, but like you have a certain perspective in life and you've gained that perspective, on various number of topics through your past experiences. So depending on how you were raised and the society you grew up in, um, we're all going to have very different abilities in terms of perhaps earning money and then managing money.
I agree. And I think some of those things can and need to be shifted. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people have destructive views of money. Let's face it. I mean, a lot of households, money was only brought up when it was a problem. It was not a topic of conversation that was positive. So people, I think, have learned to push that away or look at money as the cause of problems rather than a symptom. And there's some people that just that feel like, "Oh, I just don't want to deal with it." We talked a little bit about this before we started recording, how some people
Mm-hmm.
just feel like, "Oh, finance is something that doesn't interest me. I choose to ignore it." And it's a lot like personal health. If you ignore financial health, it will deteriorate. If you ignore physical health, it won't get better on its own. It will only get worse. We have to actively work on our relationship with our finances in order for that to improve. That being said, in order for that to happen, a lot of people do need their paradigm shifted. They need a new attitude towards money, towards finances. But I also want to touch on what you said about, you know, these gurus that,
Yeah.
own all these businesses and they talk about, if I can do it, you can do it too. And I guess I question that sometimes. Do people really even want what that person has? Like to be on a stage and you're going from one town to the next and you never see your family and
Mhm.
you're under constant stress. You're on all the time. Like, is that really happiness and freedom for most people? It would feel like a prison to most people.
Yeah.
And whether I can do it or not, is that really the version of my life that gives me a freedom of independence and abundance? Probably not. And I just want to remind people too that you do not have to be making hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to experience abundance, to have financial independence. We work with a lot of blue collar millionaires, people that made, 60, 70, $80,000 a year, and sacrificed and did difficult things. They were uncomfortable, but created a really abundant life that is based on what's meaningful to them. And I think too often people chase somebody else's version of
Mhm.
abundance and freedom rather than really understanding what's important to them. Because we don't, sorry, I'm kind of going off on this, but a lot of times we don't know what's really important to us. And we end up chasing wealth as a goal.
Mhm.
And I believe wealth is a tool to help us provide a more abundant life. And when I say wealth, I don't mean fancy cars, vacations, big homes, things like that. That isn't wealth. That's what wealth buys. But people trade away wealth for those things. And in our culture, in our society, we don't see wealth. Wealth is what happens behind closed doors.
Mhm.
Good money management, building financial independence. That's not what people see. What people see is the spending of money, which is the opposite of wealth. And I think too often we've confused the two. We chase consumption rather than financial independence.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your story. Like what, I mean, it sounds like you followed your why, and because I think that's what you're referring to is sort of like financial freedom, independence comes as a product of finding, you know, your meaning, your why, and yeah, would you agree with that? And is that how you built your wealth?
So my why, I think, has always been to empower people to a live a better version of their own lives, to become the best possible version of themselves. And I, as you mentioned in the intro, I have a degree in biochemistry. My plan was to go into medicine. I wanted to go into surgery. I thought the way for me to impact lives was to help people get put back together again. And and it's changed. But my why has stayed the same. How I accomplish that is different. But for me, one of the most important things in my life is my family. I selected this career not to build wealth, but so I would have a lifestyle that was conducive to growing a family. My wife grew up the exact opposite, but I grew up in a middle class household. My dad uh, was self-employed. He had a really steady income for the most part. There were some seasons there where that wasn't the case, but my mom stayed home with us, and my dad typically worked 4 days a week. He had a lot of time with us, and my wife's family was the opposite. Her dad left her and her three sisters when she was 4 years old. Four kids, 4 years old and under. She remembers having Christmas in homeless shelters. Her mom was an alcoholic. No stability. So when we got together, I realized what this woman wanted was not a hotshot surgeon. She wanted stability. She wanted a family. And right now, Luella, we have six beautiful children, and we we have amazing times together. And I'm not saying that I'm not busy and it isn't hard to manage that schedule, but but owning this business allows me the intentionality of putting my family first. We work very, very hard during the day, but when I'm home, I'm home. I don't bring a laptop. I don't bring my phone with me. And it's been a beautiful balance to be able to impact lives all day long, but still be there and be present with my family in the evening. So for me, I designed this, and by God's grace, it happened. But I knew what was important to me, and I knew what was important to my wife. And we've been blessed with material wealth along that journey by practicing the principles that we coach our clients and the families we work with. But that feeling of abundance, having abundant life, is more how I've engineered and designed my fitness and my spiritual journey, my family time. Because wealth by itself, material wealth, doesn't buy any of those things.
No, I 100% agree. So did you go through hard times?
Yes. So when I started this business, 2007 was when I got licensed and when I got started. And we didn't know it then, but 2007 was the peak of the market and the economy before we slid into the Great Recession, which is
Right.
the worst economic period since the Great Depression, 1929. So,
So, and when you said you got your, what was it, certification license in what?
so when I started getting licensed to do financial planning,
Okay,
was in
okay.
2007 because again, my degree is in biochemistry, my background was in medicine,
Right.
or on the way to medicine, doing all those things, and it which still fascinates me, by the way.
Yeah.
Still interested in all that stuff, but God had a different path for me. Anyway, So I got licensed to work as a financial planner in 2007 and was taking a bunch of the tests and going through the courses. And that's when that culminated in 2007. And I had a baby on the way. My daughter was born in 2008, and the world started just melting down financially.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a pedigree or a background in this. I didn't have a client base. I didn't have a lot of connections, and it was really, really scary. In fact, I was talking to a group on Monday night, and I was just relaying a story. This was a few years later. It was like 2010, 2011. We had two kids at the time, one on the way, and we were flat broke. And it was uh, I felt like an imposter, not just in my business, but as a father and a husband, because I could not provide. And it was just such a difficult time. And I remember driving home one night, and we were visiting my parents, and somebody had left a box of groceries on our front step. And to this day, Luella, I do not know who that person was, but it was a paradigm shifting thing for me because we were still broke, and a week's worth of groceries didn't solve any long-term problems, but it gave me hope. It gave me a sense of optimism that I wasn't forgotten. We were going to get through this. But it was a very, very difficult time. We made about $24,000 that year, and just our housing expenses with utilities and mortgage and just that was about $2,000 a month. So there was nothing left over. And what I felt so bad about, Luella, was this was the life that my wife had to go through as a kid, and now I'm dragging my kids through it. Like that's how I felt, even though, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she went through that without a father, and it was different, but that was the guilt that I was carrying. But it was a season. It didn't last forever. And we kept executing the principles that we knew, that we had faith would turn that situation around. But it took a long time, and it took a season of a lot of discomfort. But God was gracious with us, and now we've been able to help a lot of people through their own seasons.
Can I ask you, because I do a lot of relationship coaching and counseling as well, was that a huge strain on your relationship?
It wasn't, because it felt like us against the world a little bit. I mean, I'm not
Okay.
saying that there weren't times, but a lot of it was my own issues. It was my own guilt and frustration not being able to provide. And also I think there was, I mean, there was a lot of insecurities, obviously, but also the doubt around, did I make the wrong decision? I mean, heck, I could have been in medicine. I wouldn't have these problems if I was a doctor. Those were the narratives
Mhm.
that were going through my head. But no, my wife was very, very gracious with me, and we didn't have anything else to lean on.
Mhm.
So I think we just grabbed more tightly to each other. But I will say, the reason I think that happened is because very early in our marriage, we started talking about finances. We started having those conversations, and again, we had these principles that we were going to practice. We weren't going to take on debt. We weren't going to spend money we didn't have. We were going to be generous, even if we were broke, and maybe we could only give $5 or $10 a week to our church. We were still going to be generous, and those types of things. So we were on the same page. And I think a lot of times when you introduce financial stress to a situation, if the groundwork hasn't already been laid, it it just creates even more of a chasm between spouses.
Mhm.
Uh, but for us, we were married on a Friday, September 30th, 2005. The following Friday, we started taking a financial class together.
Great.
And it was a class that my dad had taught in past years. It's called Crown Financial. And it was started by a man named Larry Burkett, who's no longer with us. But I saw my dad teaching this class throughout my teenage years. And that's a huge reason, Luella, why I got into finances, because
Yeah.
I saw the impact that good financial principles had on people's lives
Mhm.
beyond finances. Because when
Mhm.
people start feeling freedom and they start getting confidence, they start building momentum in their finances, they start realizing the agency and ownership they can take in other areas of their life too. So I
Mhm.
saw that. And I wanted that for my family. So we started taking this class. And I think that was just getting some of those things out in the open.
Mhm.
Really prevented a lot of that tension and stress later on
Yeah.
between us at least.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I know I don't know. Like I know I talk about it a lot on my show, and maybe you do as well, though, as like in terms of why is this not in schools? I mean, why is it not taught in schools? I have three children myself, and like I question that all the time because it's like they don't want to make it common sense. The governments or the schools. They rather have you make a lot of mistakes. Um, I'm not sure, but
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just talking with a mentor of mine last week, and he was mentioning how at some point to graduate high school, you had to know what a cosine was. Now, that probably didn't come up a lot in your normal everyday life, and it's probably something that hasn't affected your choices and behaviors. But at some point, even if just long enough to take a test, you had to know what a cosine was. But most people were never taught the difference between a stock and a bond. Something that
mhm.
is so basic and so fundamental to investing and finances in general. So to your point, yeah, we just is not part of our education system. It's also not part of normal conversation. Like I said earlier, a lot of times in families, the only time finances are brought up is under stressful circumstances, when it's a problem, when somebody lost their job, when somebody spent too much money, when a mistake was made. And it was only under stress that finance is brought up. So it has a negative connotation. Kids are growing up 17, 18, 19 years old and realizing, man, when I talk about money, fights happen. And we learn to suppress that instead of learning how to discuss those things in a more open and healthy manner. So I think it's from an educational standpoint. I also think it's from a social pressure standpoint. There's a lot of reasons, but we have made money a taboo topic. And I
Yeah,
think that is really difficult because it's obviously an integral part to everybody's life,
yeah,
but we've decided to pretend like we shouldn't discuss it. And two things come out of that. Number one, healthy habits, the
hmm,
things that do help people experience victory in their finances don't get discussed because people feel like they're, well, my cup of coffee is braggy or showing off or something like that. So they don't talk about their victories. So people can't learn from those. And then on the other side, people feel shame and guilt around their mistakes, the bad things, the silly things they did with money. So they don't talk about those. So people don't have an opportunity to learn from good habits. And
hmm,
instead, they end up repeating bad behavior because
hmm,
people aren't talking about that as well. So I think if we just normalize conversation around money,
yeah,
it wouldn't solve all the problems, but it's a step in the right direction.
yeah. So, did you make mistakes financially?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. And that's and what's you talk about my why. So a part of why this is so important to me is because I had the benefit of growing up in a household where we did talk about money. Money was normalized and it was talked about when it was difficult and it was talked about when it was about blessings and hey, this just happened and now we're going to be able to take this trip or we're going to be able to do this thing or we just paid off
Mhm.
a debt or whatever it was. Like
Mm,
it was a very healthy part of growing up. And that's so rare. So I
yeah.
realized like I had the benefit that a lot of folks that we work with don't. I need to share it. I believe I have a duty to share some of those principles because my parents didn't just teach us those things, they lived them out.
Mm,
And I believe that more is caught than taught.
hmm,
And I did, my parents were not one of those people when it came to money, it was like, hey, do what we say, don't do what we do. They modeled good
hmm,
financial behavior. And
hmm,
I still made a lot of mistakes. One of the big mistakes I made was early in my adult life, getting into vehicle issues.
mm,
And it wasn't debt. I was paying cash, but instead of saving for college, instead of putting money aside for down payment on a house, at one point, well, I had three vehicles. I was like 19 or 20 years old. And it was a complete waste of money. Anything with four wheels and a motor is not wealth.
No.
It sucks wealth away.
Yes.
And you know, my wife, she came into the marriage with some student loan debt and some vehicle debt.
Mm.
And we've made mistakes along the way. Even now, I mean, we just um because some of the financial pressure has been relieved, and we are at a different spot financially. Um, we don't have to talk about some of those things as much. And we just were the other night, we're saying we need to have regular discussions about finances still, even if we're not in defensive mode anymore, but just to keep those conversations going. So she feels like her needs are being met, her dreams are being pursued, and then I feel the same way. Um, but you know, we've also tried to be really open and honest with our kids about the silly and stupid things we've done, not just with money, but
Hmm.
I want them to not feel like they have to be perfect. And a lot of people, when it comes to finances, when it comes to life in general, people there's a burden to be perfect. People don't want to start working out until they've lost 10 pounds and they
Yeah.
have a their diet already dialed in. And it's like, no, it's a work in progress. It's okay to
Hmm.
start where you are and admit your mistakes and learn from those and then reiterate. But I think in finances, there's a pressure that people need to have it all figured out. They have to have a perfect budget. They have to have all these things done. And I want my kids to be able to come to us and say, Dad, I'm struggling with this thing, or I made this mistake. I took out a loan on this. I shouldn't have done this. Um, what do I do now?
Hmm.
And not try to pretend like my wife and I have always done it perfect, because we haven't.
No. Yeah. So, no, a couple things come to my mind too. Like I know my 19-year-old was just asking us the other day about like, insurance. Like what is really insurance and what is, and is should I be getting a credit card right now? And like those kind of questions and to explain to him what paying off your credit card at the end of the month, like how important that is and and how, what the interest is and what does that mean? And because just the little things like, how they show on your statement, minimal payment due, thinking, oh, I mean, somebody who does, some young teenager who doesn't, or 20-year-old who doesn't really know much about it, it's like, oh, that's all I need to pay. Okay,
Hmm.
perfect. You know, um, and even the other day too, I stepped into the bank and I thought, I don't know what prompted me to do this. I said, okay, so these are my accounts. What is there a penalty if I don't have a certain amount in these accounts? And, so what's the minimal amount that I need to have? Um, what's the fee if for whatever reason it drops below zero? It's just like little things like and what am I paying per month for each of these
Hmm.
accounts, right? Like it's just simple things like that life gets busy, right? And it's all these monthly sort of subscriptions you belong to as well, and you just like, oh, it's $5 here, $10 there. It's is that part of the work that you do as well?
We have a financial coach that helps with that. So my most of what I do is more long-term financial planning. Coming up with goals for what a work optional income would be. And I say that it's most people call it retirement, but
Mm,
we like to think more of this idea of a job optional life where you create enough income from your investments where you don't need a paycheck anymore, but you might still choose to work. So that's the piece I work on. But we have folks that work with people just developing a budget, getting out of debt. I mean, I love what you said about the credit cards, because it isn't just a financial thing. I mean, obviously, credit cards are financial. Get used to being in debt, and they don't realize the psychological toll that it takes when they start off every single month playing catch up, because they're still trying to pay off a vacation from 6 months ago, or pay off a couch that they bought 3 months ago, or pay off a laptop that they don't even use anymore because it's now obsolete. But they start every month paying for past purchases. So they're playing catch up. They're playing from behind already on the first of every month. And that is psychologically so destructive. In fact, the Bible talks about wealth and slavery as being synonymous because you do become enslaved to past purchases when you're in debt. And it's burdensome, not just from a financial standpoint, but also from a mindset and a psychological standpoint. And I don't think a lot of people count the cost of either.
Right. I totally agree with you. Um, so how about like your background in nutrition? Because I mean, I see you, I can just tell that you are a fit individual. How does nutrition and lifestyle, how do you see it playing a role in mindset and behavior? Because you also mentioned, don't wait until you've lost 50 pounds before you feel confident in stepping into a gym. I had someone like one of my clients say that to me literally 2 days ago. She said, so what about the exercise program? I know that's something you're working towards. I just need to lose, a certain amount, and then I do plan on going into the gym. So yeah.
Well, it's intimidating. And we get the reason I use that metaphor because I think people can relate. Like, I know I should go to the gym, but I feel like I need to look better in my workout clothes before I go to the gym because people experience the same thing financially. They're like,
Mm.
well, I'm not quite ready to meet with you guys because I want to get my finances in better order before I do that. I'm like, no, that's what we do is we help you do that. But it is intimidating. Those things can be intimidating. But back to your question about nutrition. Um, so I was talking to it was actually at a marriage class a few days ago, and I was talking to this group of most of these folks were young and engaged. So it was actually a pre-marriage type class. So
Wonderful.
there's a younger generation, and I was telling them about uh, George Eastman, who you probably know. He
Yeah.
started Kodak. These kids didn't know what Kodak was. They're like, Kodak. I was like, well, okay. Back when I was growing up, a camera actually only took pictures. You couldn't make calls on it and things like that. Anyways, but I was explaining that George Eastman, who started Kodak, which is one of the most profitable companies in the world at one point, he was one of the wealthiest people in the United States. A lot of people don't know this, though. He killed himself in his 70s
Oh.
because he had a debilitating back condition and he was so unhealthy physically that didn't matter how much wealth he had, he could not buy back his health. Now, this was years and years ago. Maybe there's procedures now, but the point was that if you don't have your physical health, it doesn't matter how much money you have. You cannot live an abundant life. And I'm not saying that it was bad health choices that George Eastman made. I think it was actually some genetic factors in there too. But the point was still that if you don't have your physical health, no amount of the money in the world is going to make you live a good life. So it's important to build these things together, that you don't sacrifice your health to build wealth. We work with a lot of people in the oil field. We work with a lot of law enforcement professionals, a lot of first responders, people who are in very, very stressful jobs that have not just stress in the work that they're doing, but also in the time that they're working. They're working late shifts. They're working 24-hour shifts. Our folks that work on the oil field, they work in the north on the North Slope, up above the Arctic Circle, sometimes 2, 3 weeks at a time, working 14, 15, 16-hour days in below zero weather. And those things take a toll on your body if you're not taking care of it, even if you are taking care of it.
Mhm.
But too often we run into people that have traded their 20s and 30s and 40s, trading away their health to build wealth. And now they're in their 50s and 60s trying to buy back health. So we encourage people to build those things together, not to neglect one for the other. And we talk about nutrition a lot and fitness because I believe the disciplines are very much the same. The mindsets are very much the same in the sense that it's a lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
You can be a professional athlete in your 20s and 30s, but if you stop the disciplines that got you into that elite physical shape, you will regress. Just like somebody can make a lot of money, build a lot of wealth, but if they stop the disciplines that got them there,
Hmm.
they will regress. They will eventually lose it. And just while we're picking on professional athletes, we've seen professional athletes that you look at them now, you can't tell that they ever played a professional sport, much less ever visited
Yeah.
a gym
Hmm.
because they've let their physical health go, and a lot of them have let their wealth go as well because they've made poor health decisions, they've made poor financial decisions. So in both areas of our life, we never get to a point where we can just do things like everybody else.
No.
If you want to take control of your physical health, if you want to take control of your financial health, you have to be willing to do things differently. And it has to be a lifetime commitment. It won't happen overnight. It's a slow process. But once you have it, then you have to still work to maintain it. But it's worth the effort. It's worth the energy because while it may be uncomfortable getting into shape, it may be uncomfortable paying off debt, it may be uncomfortable saving money for the future. It's also uncomfortable to be obese. It's uncomfortable to be broke. It's uncomfortable to be in debt. So I think in those terms, we just have to realize you get to, you don't get to choose whether or not you're uncomfortable. You just
Hmm.
choose on what end of your life you're going to have that discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so what are some principles that you like love to teach surrounding like lifestyle, or like even describe what a day would be like for you, like if you practice what you preach, what would a typical day be like for you, even in terms of movement and exercise, and what helps you keep your strong mindset?
Okay. So I'll walk you through a day. Let's do
Yeah.
that. Usually get up around 6, and one of the first things I do is read. So I'll read for maybe 15, 20 minutes. And then I do a gratitude list. So
Mhm.
I write out 3 things I'm grateful for. I try to pull at least one of those things out of what I read that morning. And it's usually out of the Bible, it might be some other faith-based book, but usually try to read for 20 minutes or so in the morning out of the Bible. And I do both those things before I look at my phone.
Yeah.
So before I've had the chance to look at all the bad things that happened in the world while I was sleeping, I've read and written some positive things. So I've started some positive momentum for the day. I also make as best as I can never hit the snooze button. It's been months since I've hit
Hmm.
the snooze button because the snooze button is giving in. It's
Hmm.
giving in to temporary comfort rather than to doing the right thing. And I think it's something so simple. Some of your audience is going to laugh, be like, "Come on, is it that big of a deal?" I think it is because you're you start the day just like being in debt is like starting the day from behind. When you hit the snooze button, you start the day from behind, even if it's only 7, 8 minutes.
Hmm.
Now everything's more stressful. You have less time to get ready for work. But for me, it's a mental thing, it's a mindset thing. I don't want to start the day giving into temptation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so anyway, so that's how I begin my day.
Are you a man that makes the bed every morning, or is that important for you?
I'm not because there's my wife is usually still sleeping when I'm up when I get
Okay.
up. So but I there are things that I do to tidy up kind of along those same lines though.
Hmm.
Because you want to act on your day. And if we start our days acting on our day rather than reacting to it, our days go better. And I believe that a good morning
Hmm.
creates momentum for a good day. And a good life is built on the foundation of a lot of good days stacked together. So in many ways, I think a good morning leads to a great life. And so, anyways, so I do my gratitude journal. Usually write a couple notes for members of my family. Might be a love note for my wife, might be a note to one of my kids, and I hide them somewhere in the house. And then I either go to the gym or I go to the office. I started going to the office for a couple hours early in the morning just to get some creative work done before the rest of my staff gets there. So a lot of days I'll do that. And then when everybody's kind of filtering into the office, I'll kind of mid-morning, I'll go to the gym. I do strength work, do cardiovascular work, do a lot of movement work. One of the things I started doing recently is I got a under desk treadmill for my
Mm.
office because you mentioned movement patterns. And what I realized was if you look at my overall activity in the day, it's very high. But all of that activity, or most of it, is relegated to a very small portion of my day. So yes, I have a lot of movement, but I'm not moving through most of my day. It's all in that 1.5, 2 hour period at the gym. So I was like, I need to be just sitting less because I do have a more sedentary job. I'm in meetings, I'm on Zoom calls, doing podcasts. So that's one of the things I did to get my activity level up. Or not just my movement to be more consistent throughout the day.
Yes. Like, yes. Being, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because what I don't want is to push my body so hard and do all these things at the gym and then I just come and I just sit at my office for several hours. It's going from two extremes, and I just don't believe that's healthy. So, um, so I have some movement throughout the day, at work, and I usually wrap up my day around 5 o'clock, and I get home and uh, usually have dinner as a family. And in football season, the kids love watching football, so we'll watch that, or we might work on some things around the house. And we usually, several nights a week, we'll have family over, extended family over. So that's a big part of it. And then, but we try to have family time, like every day, have dedicated family time. And then we close out the day. Usually the little kids go to bed around 8 or so. And we ask them, what was your favorite thing about today? And what are you most looking forward to tomorrow? We do that for each of the kids, my 15-year-old down to the 3-year-old, and there's 6 of them. And and then the little guys go to bed, and then the older kids, we just have some family discussion. It might be around a sermon, it might be around something they're dealing with, but trying to connect with them and talk with them. And then I put them to bed, and then I do a little bit more reading, and
Mhm.
that's kind of my wind down time. So that
Mhm.
kind of, not every day goes like that, but
Mhm.
that's how I try to structure my days. And I think a lot of that just comes down to intentionality. Like the day doesn't
Yeah.
always go the way that you want. It's like like a budget. A budget doesn't have to be restrictive, but it's intentionality. It's telling your money where to go, so you're not wondering where it went. And my day, I try to have it scheduled out. Some people look at that as restrictive. I look at that as prioritizing. I
Mhm.
schedule out the things that matter the most to make sure they happen, and
Mhm.
I'm telling my time where it needs to be spent rather than wondering what happened to it at the end of the day.
No, exactly. And I'd say that's a great, sort of definition of like you incorporated it nicely that like in terms of the mindset, it's sort of like being intentional, uh, purposeful, like even with the snooze button. I like the way you describe that as, yes, it's for some people it might seem obsessive or like just any of your behaviors. Some people might say, oh, it's a little bit too OCD, you got to chill, you got to be relaxed. But I think it's habit building. It's related to your values and your morals, and it's building a foundation. Um, and again, tying that into what you said right in the beginning of the podcast is modeling this to your children. It's sort of like it's not like your kids are waking up, walking into the kitchen and mom and dad are still in bed, and they have to get to school in a half hour, sort of thing. I mean, um, and that's like honestly, like if I think back to, how I mentioned to you, like when the gurus, the millionaires or whatever it is, they get on and they start talking about like, hey, if I can do it, so can you. Well, like as a therapist, I'm kind of go, let's kind of go back into your childhood a little bit, I love to know a little bit more about your past experiences. And hey, I'm not using that as an excuse. all I'm saying is sort of, I think it, as you mentioned, it's for some people, it's much easier because they naturally, intuitively see these opportunities or already have that mindset, which is so important, already programmed, and they don't have to start from square one, you know. But I do believe if anybody wants it and they want to go through the hard work of changing, their behaviors and patterns in one that reflects more of the lifestyle that you're talking about, it's there. So, in the last few minutes here, why don't you tell us a little bit about the work you do and how you help people?
Sure. But before I go into that, I just want to touch on what you just said too about, these millionaires, these gurus. Um, I also think that there's a tendency for people to think that money solves their problems.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have wounds, we all have scars that we carry from the past. And too often, I think people hear those stories, hear those scenarios, and think like, if I had more money,
Yeah.
then I would feel loved. I would feel accepted. I would feel like I mattered. I would feel like I wouldn't feel insecure. I could show my parents that they were wrong about me, or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and I don't know what drives some of these people, but I do see that a lot where people look at money to solve much deeper rooted issues.
Mm-hmm.
And money has typically to make us more of who we are. So if you're insecure, money is not going to make you feel secure. It's probably going to make you feel more insecure because there's always going to be somebody that has a nicer car, a bigger house, a faster jet, whatever. Um, and if you struggle with anxiety, uh, money will just give you more to worry about. You'll
Yeah,
have
it's true.
you'll have $10 million to worry about losing instead of $100 to worry about losing. So,
Mm-hmm.
point being, I think we have to be very mindful and aware of what's going on inside of here, inside of our hearts, and that we use money as a tool to, again, build a more abundant life, not as the objective, not as the goal. That can't be the thing that we're
No.
chasing. So, to your question, what is it that we do? Well, we help people create a life where they no longer need a paycheck, where they're able to retire, but they're able to live comfortably without going to work, without running their business,
Mm,
and with the amount of confidence and security where they can live a free and dignified life without worrying about outliving or running out of money.
mm-hmm.
And coming up with specific targets and goals for what that would look like how much money, how much income would you need to feel like you could give up your paycheck? How much would you have to have invested in order to produce that income? What would your life look like? What would you want it to look like if you didn't have to go to work anymore? Where would you be? What hobbies would you pursue? If you're going to retire from this career, what are you retiring to? And we look at all those different questions. So some are financial, some are lifestyle. We try to connect those because again, we don't want to, the money might be how we measure some of these goals,
Mm-hmm.
but it can't be the overall objective. But
Mm-hmm.
we attach some financial objectives to lifestyle goals, and then we reverse engineer it to create a pathway from where somebody is to where they want to be and give them a financial blueprint of sorts that connects their decisions today with where they want to be and who they want to become in the future. We believe that that's really important, having a defined plan. Again, it
Mm-hmm.
helps keep them intentional. It helps keep them accountable. That's one of the biggest things is keeping people accountable, because it does get tiring and it is long. It's a long process, but helping people identify the impact, positive or negative, of a decision that they're making today.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going to play out in their future? And keeping them executing, keeping them on the right path. And we do the money management, the investment management, all those different things as well. But really the long and short of it is giving people a roadmap or a blueprint for how they want their financial life to play out and the impact and meaning that's going to have on them, not just from a financial standpoint, but from a lifestyle standpoint.
Okay, perfect. Who would be your ideal client?
We say we work with blue collar millionaires or people that want to be one. Not that you have to be a blue collar worker, but it's this idea that people are willing to do the difficult things. They're willing to do
Yeah.
the mundane things. That that they're not flashy, they're not exciting, but it's disciplined, patient people who are willing to do hard things now to make life better for them in the future.
Hmm.
Because most of our world, as you know, chooses to take the easy path now, which just makes life harder in the long
Hmm.
run. But our ideal clients, they're usually people who have good jobs, not great jobs, that make decent money, but who are willing to consistently pursue a different path and make the small but necessary sacrifices to live differently now so they can live differently in the future.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay. So I will link all your contact information in the show notes as always. Um, yeah, anything else you want to end this?
Well, as we've been talking about this and mindset and you mentioned a few times, when you go back to people's past, you're not giving them excuses, but helping them work through some of these things. I just want to remind people that I believe that you are the biggest variable in
Mhm.
the success of your life, the trajectory of your life. So regardless of what's happened to you, yes, you might have more work today, maybe a harder journey, but a lot of people are waiting for circumstances around them to change, but
Mhm.
the change has to start from within. Your life isn't going to change until you change. And take responsibility. It might not be your fault for where you're at in life, but it is your responsibility to fix it and to start creating something different and better. But I hope that's also empowering. I'm not trying to to give people, I mean, you can say I'm trying to give people some tough love, but that that people can make the difference in their life. They don't have to wait for things around them to change. They can be the change that they're looking for in their own life.
Exactly. Yeah, no, let me just end with giving you a quick example of someone that is exactly who you're talking about, is someone who grew up with a lot of insecurity.
Hmm.
Like he didn't have to tell me his background. I know because of what happened, but tremendous insecurity, then got into a very lucrative career. Um, and he was probably chasing wealth. Um, it's not an easy career. And and then started having affairs,
Hmm.
that took place in the office, more or less. So that's that's exactly what you're describing. I mean, you need to have that foundation, that confidence, that self-love, self-acceptance, self-worth. Otherwise, when you do actually make money, if you don't have that foundation, your life can very easily fall apart in front of you, which is what's happening right now. So, perfect example of that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, thanks so much. It was really wonderful talking to you, Chad, and thanks for everything you do. Sounds wonderful.
Well, it was a pleasure being here, and thank you for the privilege of speaking to your audience and
Mhm.
hopefully giving them some encouragement.
Yes, you certainly did. Okay, everyone else, have a great week, and we'll see you later. Thanks once again for joining me on another great episode of I Think I Can podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe below so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And until next week, treat each day like it was your last, because each new day is a privilege that we shan't take for granted. Cheers and have a great week. Bye-bye.